You wake before the sun, as every woman in the village does. The air in the cottage is heavy with night's chill, the kind that seeps through the thatch and settles into your bones. You pull the wool shawl tighter around your shoulders as you cross the dirt floor, each step crunching faintly on bits of straw. The hearth at the far wall is nothing more than ash, the fire gone quiet hours ago. For a moment, the silence is complete, only the sound of your own breath, misting faintly in the cold. Your eyes fall upon the table, a rough, hewn plank of oak, scarred with years of knives and elbows. This table has been the heart of your home, a place where bread has been sliced, broth ladled, laughter whispered. Yet now, at dawn, it lies almost bare. Only a few clay jars remain, their lids ask you, their insides scraped nearly clean. The emptiness speaks louder than words. It is January, the hungry month, and there is little left to set before your family. You run your hand across the grain of the wood, rough beneath your fingertips. You remember when it was crowded with baskets of cabbages in autumn, when roots were piled high, when loaves of bread cooled after baking. The memory lingers like a ghost, full, abundant, alive. But that was months ago. The table you touch now feels like a different thing altogether, hollow reminder, its surface holding more dust than food. You move to the nearest jar and lift the lid. Inside, only a trace of barley clings to the clay, dust rather than grain. Another pot, once filled with peas, now offers a few shriveled husks at the bottom. Even the butter crock, once golden and rich, rests silent, a faint sheen of grease clinging to its sides. Each vessel tells the same story, emptiness. The boy stirs in his bed of straw, his small body curling against the cold. He opens his eyes, looking toward you. Is there food? He asks softly, his voice still wrapped in sleep. You smile gently, though your chest tightens. There will be something. You whisper back. For in truth, there is always something, however little. Women have always found a way. You gather what you can from the table, scraping the last husks into your palm, tipping the barley dust into a cloth, coaxing life from what seems gone. It is a ritual as old as hunger itself. The table is empty, yes, but you know the hearth will hold a pot by evening, thin though it may be. As dawn brightens, pale light slipping through the shutter cracks, you set your hands upon the table once more. You let yourself imagine for a moment what might return, a loaf of black bread cooling after the mill, a wedge of cheese from a neighbor's cow, even a small jar of honey saved for feast days. These are little luxuries, far beyond what the table now holds, yet they flicker in your thoughts like warm embers. The boy rises slowly, pulling his blanket around his shoulders. He comes to sit at the table, his feet dangling above the floor. He leans his head against the wood, closing his eyes as though listening to the stories it holds.
You place your hand on his hair and murmur, "This table has seen many winters. It will see us through this one, too." The emptiness of the table is not defeat.
It is the beginning of the day's labor, the canvas upon which you will paint survival. You will scrape, you will stir, you will coax sweetness from bitterness. And when night falls, there will be something in the bowls, something steaming in the pot. For now, at dawn, the table stands silent. Yet you sit beside it with quiet determination, the boy leaning against you, the pale light touching your face. Hunger is near, but so is hope.
The table, though empty, waits to be filled again, and you know that even the smallest luxury, one pinch of salt, one drop of honey, can transform its silence into comfort. And so the day begins, with an empty table, a cold hearth, and a promise that, by evening, warmth and nourishment will return.
The table may be bare at dawn, but one thing remains, a loaf of bread, if it can truly be called a loaf. You lift it from the shelf, wrapped in a cloth that once held warmth, but now feels stiff and cool in your hands. It is not soft, not golden, not fragrant as bread ought to be. This is a poor man's bread, black, dense, hard as stone. You set it down on the table, and the boy's eyes follow it. His lips part, as though expecting sweetness, but you see the shadow of doubt flicker across his face. He remembers what it tastes like, bitter, coarse, heavy, still, in January. Even this is treasure. You rest your hand upon the crust, feeling its roughness, its unyielding weight. This is bread made from barley and rye, the grains of the poor. Wheat, soft, white, fine, belongs to another world, a world of lords and priests, of feast days in stone halls where the bread gleams pale as ivory. For peasants, wheat is a dream rarely touched. Instead, the fields you know yield rye, dark and stubborn, barley that grows where wheat refuses, oats that fill the stomach but never the heart. From these, the village mill grinds meal, coarse and flecked with husks. From this, the dough is mixed not with milk or butter, but with water and a pinch of salt, if any can be spared. The result is what sits before you now, black bread, heavy with the taste of toil. You slice into it with your knife, sawing slowly through the crust. It does not yield easily. The sound is harsh in the quiet room, each cut like the creak of old wood. When at last you free a piece, you see the inside, grey and dense, speckled with seeds. It crumbles at the edges, yet remains tough at its heart. The boy takes a piece in his hand. He nibbles at the edge, chewing slowly, his small jaw working hard. You watch him, remembering your own childhood when bread like this filled your belly day after day. It is not sweet, it is not light, but it sustains. That is enough. And yet, as you watch, you cannot help but remember how bread has always carried more than hunger. It is not just food, but symbol. In the church, the priest breaks a white loaf upon the altar, and all bow their heads. That bread is holy, pure, untouchable. Here in your hands is another kind of sacrament, the sacrament of survival. Where theirs is white and clean, yours is dark and rough, yet both tell the same story, life carried on from one day to the next. You think of how black bread was once called horse bread in some places, fit for animals more than men. And yet, for millions of peasants, it was the only bread known. Generations have lived and died with this same crust between their teeth, chewing it by the hearth, softening it in broth, breaking it to share with children. If it was poor, it was also enduring. You take a piece yourself, pressing it to your lips. The taste is bitter, the husks catching between your teeth, but as you chew, you feel the weight settle into your stomach. It is not pleasure, but reassurance. Bread, black, heavy, unyielding, says you will not starve tonight. The boy finishes his piece and looks at you. Why is theirs white and ours black? He asks softly. You brush his hair back and answer, because wheat grows where the soil is kind and our soil is not. Because lords claim what little there is. But remember, this bread is ours. We made it. It will keep us. He nods, though his eyes still wander as if imagining the taste of white bread he has never known. You smile faintly, recalling the few times in your life you tasted such a loaf at a wedding, at Easter, at the priest's table. It was soft, like eating clouds, sweetened with honey, a luxury beyond measure. But you do not speak of that now. To speak of it is to sharpen the hunger. Better to let the boy believe that black bread is enough. You soften another slice in a cup of warm broth, breaking it into smaller pieces, letting the steam seep into it. When the boy takes it this way, it is easier to swallow, less harsh against his teeth. His shoulders relax as he eats, the warmth spreading through him. You feel your own heart ease. Even this bread, so humble, can comfort when softened, when shared. As you eat together, the fire crackles faintly, and you let your thoughts drift.
You think of the cycle that brought this loaf here: seed planted in spring, stalks cut in autumn, sheaves carried on aching backs to the mill, grain ground beneath the heavy stone, flour mixed by weary hands, dough baked in the clay oven, smoke curling into the night sky.
Every stage carried hardship, yet each step transformed the seed into this bread. To eat it is to taste not only grain, but the labor of months, the endurance of earth and hand. You tell the boy this as he chews, your voice soft, steady. This bread is not only food. It is a story. Every bite holds the field, the mill, the oven, the fire. When you eat it, you eat all that has kept us alive. His eyes widen and he nods solemnly, as though the crust in his hand has become something sacred. The meal is small, and hunger will return before long.
But for now, the bread has given what it can: weight in the belly, calm in the heart, a reminder that even in January, the field still speaks.
When at last you clear the table, brushing crumbs into your palm so none are lost, you feel a quiet strength settle within you. The bread may be black, bitter, humble, but it is yours. And in the silence of the cottage, in the glow of the fire, that is enough. And so the day moves on, carried by the taste of bread alone, or coarse and yet In its way, a little luxury of its own. You turn to the shelf after the bread is eaten, your hands moving automatically, your eyes scanning the familiar jars and crocks. There is one container you reach for with more care than the rest. It is small, made of coarse cloth tied with a simple cord. When you lift it, the weight tells you what you already fear. It is nearly empty. This is the salt pouch, and it is life itself. You untie the cord and tip it gently into your palm. A few rough crystals tumble out, catching the weak firelight like tiny shards of ice. They are bright, almost beautiful, but so few. You press your thumb against them, feeling the hardness, the way they resist being crushed. How many meals can they stretch to? 3 at most, if you are sparing. After that, the pot will boil with nothing to sharpen it, nothing to coax out the sweetness of oats or roots. Without salt, the food will fill the belly but wear down the spirit. The boy, still licking the last crumbs of bread from his fingers, watches you quietly. He sees the pouch in your hand, the way you cradle it as though it were fragile. Is it gone? He asks softly. Not yet, you reply. There is a little left. Enough for us a few more days. He nods, but his eyes linger on your palm. He knows what it means when the pouch runs dry. He has tasted porridge without it, flat, bitter, joyless. He has seen neighbors grow thin and weary, not only from hunger, but from the endless monotony of blandness. Salt is small, but it carries hope. You pour the crystals back into the pouch carefully, every grain precious. Your mind drifts to the journey they once took to reach you. Perhaps they came from a distant mine, deep in the earth where men with lamps and picks hacked white stone from the walls. Perhaps from the sea, water evaporated under the sun until only salt remained. However it came, it travelled far, passed from merchant to merchant, cart to cart again, until at last it reached your hands in exchange for coins you could barely spare. Salt has always been wealth. You remember hearing the word salary once, the pay of soldiers measured in salt. You remember the priest preaching that salt was holy, used in blessings, mixed with water to banish evil. And you recall old sayings whispered among women, that salt spilled meant sorrow, that a pinch thrown over the shoulder could keep misfortune away. It is more than food. It is protection. You close your eyes for a moment, recalling the first time you tasted it as a child. The porridge had been the same as always, oats and water, but your mother had dropped a few crystals in. Suddenly, the flavor came alive. It was as though the world had been sharpened, made brighter. You remember laughing, unable to stop spooning it to your lips. Even now, decades later, you feel the echo of that first taste. The boy stirs you from your thoughts. Can we use some tonight? He asks hopefully. You smile faintly. Yes, a little. Just enough. You set the pot on the hearth, pour water, add a handful of oats. As the fire warms, the grains begin to soften, swelling into gruel. You open the pouch again, pinch a few crystals between your fingers, and scatter them into the pot. They vanish instantly, dissolving into the water, leaving behind only their gift. The smell changes almost at once. The broth seems richer, fuller. The boy leans forward, sniffing eagerly, his eyes widening. At last you ladle the porridge into his bowl. He takes a cautious sip, then another, and a smile spreads across his face. It tastes better, he whispers. You take your own portion, and you feel it too. The way the salt lifts the dullness, coaxes out a sweetness hidden in the grain, transforms grey into gold. It is a small miracle, repeated each time. You close your eyes, savouring it, letting the taste linger on your tongue. The boy eats slowly, stretching each spoonful, as though he knows these last days of salt are precious. You watch him, your heart heavy and light at once. Heavy because the pouch grows, lighter, light because you can give him this gift a little longer. When the bowls are empty, you tie the pouch again and set it back on the shelf. It rests beside the empty butter crock and the dwindling loaf, 3 symbols of survival. Your hand lingers on it a moment longer, as if by touch alone you can will the crystals to multiply. Night gathers outside, the wind pressing against the shutters. You sit by the fire, the boy curled beside you, and think of how salt binds you to the earth and to others. It preserves meat in times of plenty. It blesses bread in the church. It sharpens porridge in a peasant's hut. It is the same substance, whether in a noble's cellar or your pouch, whether on a lord's feast table or in your humble pot. In its brightness lies equality, even if the measure is not the same.
You whisper a prayer as the fire flickers low. Let this pouch last, let it carry us to spring. And so, though the pouch is nearly empty, though only a few pinches remain, the salt tonight has given its gift.
It has brightened the meal, lifted the spirit, reminded you and the boy that even the smallest luxury can make survival sweet. The salt pouch is tied and returned to the shelf. But the night is not finished. The boy stirs, restless with hunger still lingering in his belly. You rise once more and reach for the pot that hangs above the hearth. It is blackened with soot, iron worn thin from years of fire, its handle shiny where countless hands have touched it. This is the vessel that holds the family's life, the constant companion of every household, the pottage pot. You tip in what little you have left from the day. A sliver of onion, a crust of bread broken small, a handful of oats saved from the morning. Into this you pour water from the jug, watching as the pot swallows the thin trickle. It's not much, but once again, it will become something. The miracle of pottage is not in its richness, but in its persistence. You stir with the long wooden spoon, the same one you have used for years. Its surface is dark, smooth with wear, each groove a record of meals past. The boy leans close, resting his chin on his arms, eyes following your hand as it moves round and round, coaxing life from scraps. The water begins to cloud, first pale, then darker as bread dissolves, as oats surrender their starch. Steam rises, fragrant with onion, and the faintest whisper of herbs clinging still to the pot's sides. The boy whispers, "Is it always the same?" You smile faintly. No. Always pottage, but never quite alike. This is true. In every cottage, every day, pottage is the meal that endures. Sometimes thick, studded with beans, peas, roots. Sometimes thin as broth, flavored only by bread crusts. It simmers on every hearth, morning until night, food for rich and poor alike, though what goes into the pot differs greatly between manor and hut. In noble halls, meat and spices enrich it, turning it into stew worthy of feasts. In cottages like yours, it remains humble, stretched endlessly, the eternal pot that never truly empties. You recall how your mother once told you that some families never cleaned the pot fully. They scraped the sides, yes, but left a little always clinging, so that tomorrow's broth carried yesterday's flavor, a continuity of taste that linked days into months. The pottage was not a meal but a river, flowing without end, fed by whatever scraps could be spared. You continue to stir, listening to the bubbles rise. The boy's eyes follow each one, fascinated. To him, this pot is the center of life, as it was for you. Generations of children have fallen asleep to the sound of bubbling pottage, comforted not by fullness, but by the promise that food will be there when they wake. The steam rises higher now, warming the air, softening the cold. You breathe it in, and though it carries only onion and grain, it feels richer than any feast.
The boy leans closer, letting the mist touch his face, closing his eyes as though he is drinking it before it even reaches the bowl.
Laugh softly, and he grins back, teeth flashing briefly in the dim light. For a moment, the hunger is forgotten. As the pot simmers, your thoughts drift to the wider world. You remember tales of monasteries where monks kept great pots simmering for pilgrims, ladling out pottage thick with beans and herbs, a holy gift of hospitality. You recall markets where villagers would sell portions of stew to travelers too weary to cook. You think of feast days, when the same pot in your hearth might be graced with a slice of bacon or a dollop of butter, transforming it into something splendid. Pottage is always present, humble or grand, plain or rich, yet always the same in essence. You ladle some into a bowl for the boy. He takes it eagerly, blowing gently on the steam, then lifting the spoon to his lips. His shoulders ease as he swallows, warmth spreading through him. He looks up and says, "It tastes better tonight." You nod. Perhaps it is the memory of the salt, perhaps the sweetness of onion, perhaps only the comfort of routine. Whatever the reason, it soothes him. You take your own portion next, sipping slowly. It is thin, but it fills you. Each spoonful tastes of endurance, of centuries of peasants before you who stirred the same pot, scraped the same scraps, fed their children with the same thin broth. You feel their presence around you, as though the very act of stirring links you to them, a chain of hands passing the spoon through time. When the bowls are empty, the boy leans against you, his eyelids heavy. You set the pot aside, leaving the last spoonfuls to cool for tomorrow. You will not throw them away. In the morning, you will add more water, another crust, another handful of oats if you can spare it, and the pot will live again. That is the way of pottage. Never ends. It only transforms. You stroke the boy's hair as he drifts to sleep, whispering softly, "This pot has kept us, and it will keep us still." The fire flickers, the steam fades, the night grows deeper. Hunger lingers, but the warmth of the broth, the sound of bubbling, the memory of flavor, all these are enough to carry you through. And so, though the meal is thin, though the pantry is bare, the eternal pottage sustains. It ties one day to the next, one life to another, whispering that survival need not be sweet or rich to be holy. The fire burns low, the pot of pottage set aside for morning, and silence drifts back into the cottage. The boy is half asleep against your shoulder, his breath slow and shallow. You smooth his hair, listening to the wind pressing against the shutters, and feel the weight of the season settle upon you. The pantry is thin, too thin. Bread dwindles, salt nearly gone, roots shriveled. How many more days can be stretched from so little? You rise quietly, laying the boy onto his straw bed. He curls into his blanket, sighing, already drifting deeper into sleep. You turn back toward the shelf, scanning once again the jars and pots, your fingers trailing over their lids as though touch might conjure something hidden. You know them all too well, empty, scraped, bare. And yet, tonight, a thought stirs in your mind. There is one vessel you have not checked in months. Small, earthen, tucked behind the others. You pull it forward. Now, dust thick upon its lid. Your hands tremble slightly as you lift it, for you dare not hope too much. The lid resists, stuck with age, but at last it yields. Inside, you see gold. Not coin, not treasure, but something rarer in January, honey. Thick, amber, glistening in the dim light, it clings to the sides of the jar like liquid sunlight. Your breath catches. Your heart thuds. You had forgotten this, saved from late summer, a gift from a neighbor whose hives had been generous. You had told yourself you would keep it for a special day, and then the days turned cold, and hunger swallowed memory. Yet here it is now, waiting like a miracle. You dip a finger in, touch the surface. It resists, thick and heavy, then yields. Lift it to your lips and taste. Sweetness floods your mouth, overwhelming in its richness. It is unlike anything you have tasted in months, no bitterness, no dullness, only the pure essence of flowers, of sunlight, of buzzing fields alive with bees. Your eyes close, and for a moment you are no longer in winter. You are back in August, the air warm, the meadow bright, the world generous. The boy stirs and murmurs. Kneel beside him, whispering softly, "Wake, little one. I have something for you." He blinks, rubbing his eyes, confused. You lift the jar so he can see. At first, he frowns, another pot. But when you dip a spoon in and let the honey catch the firelight, his eyes widen. "What is it?" he asks, wonder in his voice. "Honey," you reply, smiling. "A drop of summer, saved for us." You spread a little onto a piece of the black bread crust, softened in broth. The honey glistens, golden against the dark. You place it in his hands. He bites carefully, his small teeth sinking into the crust. For a moment, his face is unreadable. Then it brightens, joy spilling across his features. He chews, swallows, and laughs softly. It's sweet. You nod, your throat tight with relief. "Yes, my love." Sweetness. He eats slowly, savoring each bite as though it were the greatest feast. You watch him, heart swelling. In his smile, you see the power of this little luxury, how a single drop can turn hunger into happiness. You take a piece yourself, dipping it into the honey. The taste is no less astonishing the second time. It spreads warmth through you, easing the ache of worry, filling you with strength. Honey has always been precious, even spoken of in holy words, the land of promise described as flowing with milk and honey. Tonight, in your small cottage, you feel that promise kept in a single spoonful. The boy licks his lips, sighing contentedly. "It tastes like the sun," he whispers. You stroke his hair.
That is because the bees gather it from flowers. Every drop is made from thousands of blossoms, from summer itself. He yawns, sleepy again, but his smile lingers.
You tuck him back beneath his blanket, the sweetness still upon his tongue. His eyes close, and he drifts into dreams softer than before. You set the jar carefully back upon the shelf, covering it with linen. There is still some left, enough for a few more nights, if used sparingly. It is treasure now, more precious than silver, for it brings not only nourishment but joy. You sit by the hearth, watching the fire glow. The taste still lingers on your tongue, a reminder that even in the leanest times, the earth gives small gifts. Honey is more than food. It is memory, hope, and light, distilled into gold. And so, though winter presses hard, though hunger shadows each day, tonight you have touched sweetness. Tonight the pantry has yielded a miracle. Tonight, you and the boy have tasted the sun. The jar of honey rests upon the table like a hidden jewel uncovered, its surface glistening faintly in the glow of the fire. You lift the spoon once more, dipping it gently into the amber depths. The honey clings, slow and heavy, before slipping into the bowl. You drizzle it across the last piece of black bread, watching how it gleams against the dark crust like sunlight spilling over earth. The boy leans forward, his eyes wide. He has never seen food shine before. In his world, meals are grey, brown, muted. Bread, pottage, roots nourishing but dull. Now, before him, something golden sparkles as though touched by heaven. You place the piece in his hands. His fingers tremble as he lifts it. He bites carefully, slowly, as if afraid it might vanish. For a moment his expression is blank, his eyes blinking, his lips still. Then the sweetness floods his tongue, and his whole face transforms. His eyes widen, his brows lift, and a smile spreads across his mouth. He lets out a small laugh of surprise. "It's sweet," he exclaims, the words tumbling out in wonder. You watch him, your heart softening. The sound of joy in his voice feels like music in the barren January night. "Yes," you whisper. "Sweetness." He chews again, savoring it, his shoulders relaxing. Each bite seems to brighten him, chasing away the thinness of his cheeks, the wariness in his eyes. He eats slowly, stretching the moment, letting the sweetness linger as long as possible. You take a piece for yourself, dipping it lightly into the honey. When it touches your tongue, the flavor bursts, rich, floral, golden. It is not simply sweet, but layered with memory, meadows humming with bees, plover swaying in the wind, sunlight warm upon your back. For a moment, you are far from the cold hearth and the empty jars. You are in summer again, and the taste is a bridge carrying you there. You swallow, sighing softly. The boy watches you, grinning. "It's like the sun," he says, voice hushed in awe. "Yes," you answer, brushing his hair back.
The bees gather it from thousands of flowers. Each drop is made from summer itself. He nods solemnly, as if this makes the honey even more sacred.
He licks the last trace from his fingers, unwilling to waste a drop. Then he leans back, contentment glowing in his face. For a long moment, the cottage is quiet except for the crackle of the fire. Yet the air feels changed. The honey has filled not only the stomach but the spirit. It has brought warmth that no fire alone could give. Your thoughts drift to the place of honey in the world beyond your cottage. Remember how it is prized in monasteries, kept in gleaming jars, used to sweeten ale and to preserve fruits. You recall hearing that kings and lords pour it freely over roasted meats, dripping it onto pastries, stirring it into spiced wines. For them, it is abundance, commonplace, one of many luxuries. For you, it is a miracle, single jar hidden, now revealed, transforming hunger into joy. You also recall how honey has long been medicine. Mixed with herbs, it soothes sore throats, spread on wounds, it draws out infection. Even the priest speaks of honey as holy, the sweetness of the promised land. Tonight, you feel that holiness in the jar before you, as though heaven itself had sent a gift to your table. The boy yawns, his body relaxing, the sweetness still on his lips. You tuck him into his blanket, watching as his eyes drift closed, his smile lingering even in sleep. He whispers softly, almost dreaming already, "More tomorrow." You kiss his brow. "Yes, a little. We must make it last." He sighs and sinks into slumber, his breathing deep and even. You return to the table, lifting the jar once more. You hold it close to the firelight, watching how the gold shimmers within. There is not much, perhaps a few more spoonfuls, but it feels like wealth beyond measure. You cover it with linen again and place it back on the shelf with reverence. Sitting by the hearth, you let the taste linger on your tongue, the memory warm in your heart. The world outside is frozen, the pantry bare, but inside you hold a sweetness that carries the promise of spring. Honey is not only food, it is hope distilled, sunlight captured, a reminder that even in the darkest season, beauty endures. And so, though hunger still lingers, though the night is long, the first taste of sweetness has changed everything. It has lit the cottage with joy, given the boy a smile, given you strength. In that single drop, you have touched abundance. When the boy is asleep again, his lips still sticky with the memory of honey, you rise and tend to the fire. The flames whisper low, shadows stretching high upon the walls. As you look upward, your eyes fall upon the rafters, dark beams of wood, old and cracked, holding the roof together. From them dangle bundles tied with twine, forgotten until this moment. They hang in clusters, long since dried, their leaves curled, their colors faded to dusty green and brown. Sage, thyme, perhaps rosemary, though the months have blurred their shapes. They have swung silently overhead through autumn and into winter, gathering smoke, dust and time. Yet still, when the air shifts, a faint fragrance escapes, a ghost of summer lingering in the cold. You take a stool and climb carefully, reaching up. The twine is rough in your hands as you untee one bundle and bring it down into the light. You crush a leaf between your fingers, and at once a sharp aroma rises, sage, dry but alive, pungent enough to fill the air. Your heart lifts. But though these herbs are no longer fresh, they still carry power. You crumble a few into the cooling pot of pottage by the fire. The steam rises again, richer now, layered with fragrance. You lean over and breathe it in. The scent is enough to change everything. What was plain becomes perfumed. What was dull becomes bright. You taste a spoonful, and the bitterness of grain softens. The sweetness of onion deepens. The herbs have awakened the broth, as though they carried in them a memory of green fields and sunlit gardens. You sit back, cradling the spoon, and let your mind wander. You remember the garden of summer, rows of herbs planted in neat lines. The boy running through them, laughing, brushing leaves with his hands until their scent clung to his skin. You remember gathering them in late August, tying them in bundles, hanging them high to dry. You had meant to use them slowly through the winter, but hunger and work had pushed them to the back of your mind. Now, in January, they return like a blessing you had forgotten. Herbs have always been more than flavor. You recall how the healer in your village uses sage tea for sore throats, thyme for coughs, rosemary to drive away melancholy. You remember neighbors placing sprigs above doors to ward off evil, priests sprinkling holy water scented with basil to bless homes. Even in their dryness, herbs carry power both earthly and divine. You taste again, and the warmth spreads through you. The boy stirs faintly in his sleep, perhaps catching the fragrance, and smiles without waking. You smile too, imagining the comfort these herbs will bring when he tastes them tomorrow. You think of how nobles in their manners use spices brought from far off lands, cinnamon, pepper, cloves, poured into their stews by the handful. To them, herbs are nothing, too common to notice. But here, in your cottage, these faded leaves are treasure. They turn survival into something more. They turn necessity into delight. You set the bundle back on the shelf, careful now, determined to make them last. A pinch for tomorrow's pottage, another for the next. Each day will be brighter, each meal more bearable. You lift your face toward the rafters again, seeing more bundles swaying gently in the draft. You had forgotten their presence, but they have been watching over you all along, guardians of flavor, protectors of spirit. The fire glows, the herbs scent the air, the boy sleeps soundly. You lean back in your chair, closing your eyes, letting the fragrance carry you into memory. Summer lingers here still, in the rafters, in the leaves, in the breath of green hidden within the grey of January. So, though the pantry is bare, though hunger lingers, you have found another luxury. Not gold, not feast, but herbs hung from the rafters, whispers of warmth, reminders of hope, promises that even the simplest pot can bloom again. The bundle of herbs rests once more upon the shelf, its fragrance lingering in the air like a soft blessing. The boy sleeps, the fire hums low, and your eyes wander again across the pantry. There is so little left: an empty butter crock, a pouch of salt nearly gone, the jar of honey half hidden, the black bread dwindling. Yet among these, another treasure waits, one almost forgotten, a small, hard lump wrapped in cloth. You lift it carefully, unwrapping the linen. Within lies a crust of cheese. Not a soft wedge, not a golden wheel, but a hardened scrap, dry as bone, its edges cracked, its color faded to pale ivory. To anyone else, it might seem useless, a relic better fed to dogs. But to you, in January, it is wealth. You hold it to your nose. Faint still, beneath the dryness, there lingers the scent of milk and pasture, of cows grazing in summer fields. It is enough to make your mouth water. You scrape the surface with your knife, catching a few shavings that fall like crumbs of treasure into your palm. You recall the market day when you obtained it. The stalls were crowded, voices rising, baskets spilling over with cabbages, apples, and bread for those who could afford them. At the dairy stall, wheels of cheese sat proudly on wooden boards, their rinds smooth, their centers creamy. You had no coin for such luxuries. Yet the cheesemaker, pity in his eyes, sold you the crust, the hardened end, trimmed away, no longer fit for his wealthy customers. It cost little, but to you it was priceless. Now, months later, this fragment remains. It has grown tougher, harder, but it still carries within it the ghost of richness. You shave a little into the pot of pottage, still warm from the herbs. The flakes melt slowly, their scent blooming as they dissolve. At once, the broth changes, the dullness lifts, the onion grows deeper, the oats richer. The fragrance fills the cottage, sharp and tangy, filling your chest with longing. You take a spoonful and taste. The flavor surprises you: intense, salty, alive. It spreads across your tongue, awakening every sense. For a moment, you close your eyes, letting it carry you. You are no longer in a bare cottage in midwinter, but in the market square again, sunlight bright, voices loud, wheels of cheese stacked high, life bustling and full. The boy stirs, half wake, his nose twitching at the smell. He lifts his head, blinking. What is that? He whispers. Cheese, you replace softly, smiling. His eyes widen, and he sits up straighter. He remembers the taste, rare, but unforgettable. You ladle a small bowl for him, making sure some flakes float within. He takes a cautious sip, then another, and his lips part in a smile. It tastes rich, he says, wonder in his voice. Watch him, your heart lightened. Yes, rich, that is the word. Not plentiful, not filling, but rich, a taste beyond mere survival. For a child who has known only bread and oats, this sharpness is a revelation. He eats slowly, reverently, as though afraid it might vanish. You think of how cheese has always marked status. In noble halls, great wheels are carved and shared freely, offered on silver platters, eaten with fruit and bread. In monasteries, monks age it carefully, using it to strengthen their fasts. But in peasant cottages, cheese is rare, appearing only as gifts or scraps, crusts too hard for others, but precious to you. Tonight, that contrast feels sharper than ever. Yet the boy's smile tells you that the smallest fragment can feel like abundance. When his bowl is empty, you scrape a few crumbs for yourself. The flavor clings to your tongue, salty and bold. It lingers long after, warming you more than the fire. You rewrap the crust, hiding it again within its cloth. There is still some left, enough to shave into pottage another night. You will make it last, as you have made everything last. The boy lies back, sighing contentedly. It's like a feast, he whispers before sleep claims him again. You stroke his hair, smiling. Yes, feast. In its own way. A feast not of abundance, but of transformation. You sit quietly, listening to the crackle of the fire, the wind pressing at the shutters, the boys breathing steady beside you. In the darkness, the scent of cheese still lingers, faint but sharp.
You let it fill you, reminding you that survival is not only about eating, but about moments like these, moments when hardened crust becomes treasure, when poverty bends into richness, when a child's smile becomes the finest luxury of all.
And so, though the market stalls are long closed, though the pantry is thin, tonight you have tasted wealth. Not gold, not silver, but cheese, hard, humble, miraculous. Night deepens, the rafters creak, the wind sighs against the shutters. Yet inside the cottage, the air feels gentler than it did a week ago. A little honey, a pinch of herbs, a shaving of cheese, small things, yet they have brought warmth greater than the fire. The boy stirs on his straw bed, half dreaming, half awake. He rolls onto his side and blinks at you, his eyes soft and heavy with sleep. Then, almost without thinking, he smiles. It is not the forced smile of politeness, nor the weary smile of endurance. It is pure, unguarded delight, blooming across his face like sunlight breaking through clouds. You lean close, brushing a strand of hair from his brow. "What is it, little one?" You whisper. He sighs, still smiling. The honey, the cheese, it was good. His voice is slow, drowsy, but filled with wonder, like a feast. You feel your heart ache and soften all at once. For a child, joy does not require abundance. A spoonful of sweetness, a hint of sharpness, a fragrance of herbs, these are enough to lift the spirit. You realize in this moment that his smile is the true luxury, rarer even than honey or salt. It is the sign that hunger has loosened its grip, if only for tonight, replaced by contentment. He sits up a little, rubbing his eyes. "Will there be more tomorrow?" he asks, not with demand, but with hope. You stroke his cheek. "Yes, a little. We will make it last." He nods solemnly, then giggles suddenly, the sound soft and surprising in the quiet room. The sound of his laughter feels like firelight itself, chasing away shadows, warming the cold corners of the cottage. You cannot help but laugh softly with him, though your throat is tight with gratitude. As he settles again beneath his blanket, you think of how rare laughter is in winter. Children in the village grow pale and quiet during these months, their play subdued, their voices hushed by hunger. Joy is a fragile thing, easily stolen by empty bellies. Yet here, tonight, a boy laughs because of honey, herbs, and cheese. Because you found a way to turn scraps into treasures. Your thoughts drift to the place of children in the medieval world. You recall how many never see adulthood, how winter fevers or famines claim them. Yet you also remember how fiercely communities protect them, sharing food, watching over them, telling stories by the hearth. Children are not simply mouths to feed, but living hope, the promise that life continues. Their smiles are investments greater than coin.
The boy yawns again, curling into his blanket, but before sleep takes him, he murmurs, "I dreamed I had a loaf of white bread and I dipped it in honey. It tasted like heaven." You kiss his forehead gently.
Then dream it again, my love. Dreams are feasts no hunger can take. He drifts into slumber, his breathing even, his face calm. You sit watching him for a long time, the fire flickering low. In his peaceful expression, you see the victory of the day, not that the pantry is full, but that joy has survived. Take the bundle of herbs from the shelf once more, holding it in your lap. The scent rises faintly, mingling with the warmth of the fire. You think of how these humble things, herbs, honey, cheese, have transformed not only the meal, but the spirit of the house. Without them, the cottage would still stand, the fire would still burn, but the air would feel heavier, colder. With them, the night feels lightened, softened by delight. You close your eyes, remembering the boy's laughter. It echoes in your mind like a song, sweet and clear. You whisper a prayer of thanks not for abundance, but for small mercies, for the truth that even in hardship, delight is possible. You open your eyes again. The fire has burned lower, the shadows longer. You rise and tuck the jars and bundles back onto the shelf, careful to hide them well. Tomorrow will come, and you will use them sparingly. But tonight, you let the memory linger. The boy shifts in his sleep, smiling still. His face is peaceful, free of fear, free of longing. You watch him, your chest full. This, you realize, is the greatest luxury of all, a child's delight, shining in the dark of winter. And so, though hunger is never far, Though the pantry remains thin, you have been given a gift tonight that no lord's feast could surpass. Not meat, not wine, not silken bread, only the simple joy of a child, laughing softly over honey and cheese, falling asleep with a smile. The fire has dwindled to embers, the boy breathes softly in sleep, and you prepare to rest yourself when a sound startles you, a knock at the door. It is soft, hesitant, almost ashamed, but clear against the silence of night. For a moment your heart quickens. In January, a knock after dark carries weight. It may mean need, or sorrow, or both. You rise, wrap your shawl tight around your shoulders, and cross the room. When you open the door, the cold rushes in, biting your skin. There, framed by the darkness, stands your neighbor. Her cloak is patched, her hair damp with frost, her eyes hollow from hunger. In her arms she holds a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "Good evening," she whispers, voice hoarse. "I would not disturb you, but we have no salt left." I thought perhaps she trails off, ashamed to finish. You feel the pouch on your shelf in your mind, the memory of its dwindling weight. There is barely enough for yourself and the boy. Yet as you look into her eyes, you see the same desperation you feel each day, the same shadow that lingers in your own heart. You think of her children, thin and shivering in their own cottage. You cannot turn her away. Without a word, you fetch the pouch. You untee the cord and pour a few precious crystals into your palm. They glitter faintly in the firelight, small as dust, yet priceless. You fold them into a scrap of cloth and place it in her hand. Her eyes glisten. She grasps your wrist, whispering, "Bless you." Then she unwraps her own bundle. Inside lie 3 dried apples, wrinkled but whole, their sweetness preserved from autumn. "Please," she says, "take these. It is all I can spare." You hesitate, but she insists, pressing them into your hand. The exchange is made, pult for apples, life for life. You close the door behind her, the wind sealed out once more, and carry the fruit to the table. The boy stirs, half awake, and sees the apples. His eyes widen. "Apples?" he murmurs in wonder. He has not seen fruit in weeks, not since the harvest. You stroke his hair. "Yes, little one. Tomorrow, we will share them." He smiles drowsily, already dreaming of sweetness. You place the apples beside the fire, letting their faint fragrance fill the room. You sit back and let your thoughts drift. In this simple trade, you remember the strength of the village. Life in winter is never endured alone. Families knock upon each other's doors, sharing scraps, exchanging treasures. One day you give, the next you receive. Together, you weave a fragile net strong enough to catch survival. You recall how, as a girl, your mother once sent you with a crust of bread to a neighbor whose child was ill. The woman wept at the gift, though it was small. Days later, she brought eggs when her hens laid again. It was always thus giving and taking, never in equal measure, but always enough. In noble halls, wealth is counted in coins and jewels. In villages, wealth is counted in apples, in salt, in favors freely given.
Tonight, you feel richer than any lord, for you hold in your hand 3 apples that will brighten tomorrow, and you know that another family across the field will taste salt and find strength.
The fire hums, the boy sighs in sleep, the apples gleam faintly in the glow. You close your eyes and whisper a prayer, not for more, but for enough. For the bonds of neighbors, for the kindness that keeps famine from turning into despair.
And so, though the pantry is bare, though winter howls outside, the knock at the door has brought not only apples and salt, but comfort.
You are not alone. The village endures together. The apples rest by the fire, their wrinkled skins catching the faint light, promising a sweetness tomorrow. The boy sleeps again, his face peaceful, but your own mind will not yet settle. Hunger is quieter tonight, but memory stirs loudly. The taste of honey, the fragrance of herbs, the tang of cheese, they awaken thoughts of times when food was more than survival. They awaken memories of feast days. You sit by the fire, folding your shawl close, and let yourself drift backward in time. You remember the toll of church bells, bright and insistent, summoning everyone to gather. The feast of Saint Michael in autumn, the Christmas vigil in December, the solemn joy of Easter in spring. Each one marked by ritual, by prayer, by firelight and incense, and always by food. On those days, even the poorest household found something to share. A crust of bread brushed with butter, a cup of ale sweetened with honey, a piece of cheese saved for weeks. You recall your mother breaking open a hidden jar of berries, long preserved, so that children could taste their tart sweetness on a holy day. You remember the smell of roast meat drifting from a neighbor's hearth, rare enough to make mouths water in the street. For peasants, feast days were not only about church or ritual, they were about breaking monotony, about tasting something different, something bright, even if only for one day. In a world of endless bread and pottage, a spoon of honey or a slice of white loaf was as thrilling as treasure. You close your eyes, recalling the first time you tasted white bread at Easter. The priest had blessed it, the crust pale, the inside soft as clouds. You remember biting into it, astonished by the difference from the black rye loaves of home. It was like eating sunlight, like tasting purity itself. That single bite fed you in memory for months afterward. The boy has not yet known such moments. He knows only black bread and broth, with rare sparks of honey and cheese. You wonder if one day he will sit in church on a feast day, receive a blessed loaf, and carry that taste with him forever. You stir the embers absently, the memories pulling at your heart. You think of Christmas just past, so thin, so quiet. Once, you would have made cakes fried in oil, spiced if you could afford it, shared with neighbors. This year there was only bread and broth, though you sang softly by the fire to keep the spirit alive. But even that was enough, for the boy laughed at your song, and joy lit the cottage despite the empty shelves. You sigh softly. Feast days remind you of contrast between wealth and poverty, but also between despair and endurance. Nobles celebrated with tables groaning under roasted boar, puddings heavy with butter and eggs, jugs of wine spiced with cinnamon. You celebrated with a spoon of honey dripped on a crust, a pinch of herbs added to broth. And yet, the feeling was the same, to step out of ordinary hunger and into something brighter, if only for one day. The church taught that feast days lifted the soul closer to heaven. You believe this to be true, but not only because of prayer or ritual. It was the taste, the sweetness, the richness, the rare luxury that made you feel touched by grace. In those bites you felt seen, remembered, loved. You glance at the apples by the fire. Tomorrow, when you slice them and share them with the boy, it will be a feast day of your own. No bells will ring, no priest will chant, but the sweetness will lift your spirits just the same. You whisper to yourself, every day can hold a feast, if we find it. The words warm you, and you let them settle into your heart. The fire sinks lower, the boy breathes steadily, the cottage rests in quiet. Outside, the wind still roams the frozen fields, but inside, memory and hope weave together. You are carried by the remembrance of feast days past, and by the promise of small feasts yet to come. And so, though January is lean, though the pantry is bare, you remember the taste of celebration. That memory itself becomes a luxury, one more thread of sweetness woven into the harsh cloth of winter. The memory of feast days lingers as you sit by the fire, but the wind outside carries another reminder. Faintly, through the night, comes the sound of bells, not the slow toll of the parish, but bright and merry, chiming from the manor on the hill. You pause, listening, your heart tightening. You know what it means. A banquet is underway. In your mind, you can see it clearly. The great hall lit with torches, tapestries glowing with color. Long tables heavy with platters of roasted meats, venison hunted in the forest, pork basted in fat, fowl stuffed with herbs, loaves of white bread stacked like pillows, soft and light, broken easily by noble hands, jugs of wine spiced with cinnamon and cloves, their aroma filling the air. Dishes sweetened with sugar, rare and costly, brought from far-off lands, served as if they were nothing. Music rises with the laughter, the scrape of knives, the clink of goblets. You swallow hard, glancing back at your own table. There sits a crust of black bread, dense and bitter, a pouch of salt nearly empty, a pot of pottage thinned with water, flavored only by herbs saved from summer. No music here, no jugs of wine, only the crackle of fire and the boy's steady breath in sleep. For a moment, bitterness pricks at you. The land that yields the Lord's venison, the fields that grow his wheat, are the same that press you into hunger. You bend your back in those fields, yet the golden loaves climb to his table while black crusts remain on yours. It is an old truth, older than memory, and tonight it stings. As quickly as the thought comes, you let it pass, for envy feeds nothing. You turn your eyes back to the fire, to the boy curled in his blanket. Here lies your feast, not in abundance, but in presence, in survival, in the sweetness of honey, the fragrance of herbs, the tang of cheese. Their feast may glitter brighter, but yours warms the soul. You remember, too, that banquet's end. Meat grows cold, wine spills, laughter fades. Waste is thrown aside, bones fed to dogs, crumbs swept into the rushes. Their plenty breeds carelessness. But here, every crumb of bread, every crystal of salt, every leaf of time is honored. Nothing wasted, nothing forgotten. Poverty sharpens gratitude, turning scraps into gifts. You stir the embers, imagining the two tables side by side, theirs groaning with excess, and yours humble and bare. At first glance, the contrast is cruel, yet when you look deeper, you see something else. At your table, there is reverence, there is patience, there is joy in small mercies. At theirs, there is only indulgence, quickly forgotten. The boy shifts, murmuring in his sleep, a faint smile on his lips. You smile too, thinking of the honey that brought that smile, the laughter it stirred. No lord's feast could buy such treasure. Outside, the bells fade, the music softens, the night settles. The manna glows unseen on the hill, but you no longer hear it. The fire before you hums, the apples by the hearth gleam, the boy sleeps peacefully. Your cottage is enough. Whisper to yourself, let them feast. We endure. And with those words, you feel calm return, soft as a blanket laid over your shoulders. And so, though the world is divided, Anna and cottage, plenty and scarcity, you sit content. For you have learned that true luxury is not in abundance, but in the sweetness of small things, in the strength of survival, and in the joy of a child asleep with a smile. Morning returns, pale and cold, the frost tracing white fingers across the shutter slats.
The boy rubs his eyes, yawns, and asks the same question as always. What will we eat today? You smile faintly, though the answer is thin.
Pottage again. Always pottage. You set the pot upon the hearth, pouring in water, stirring in the last handful of oats and a crust of bread. The broth bubbles, dull and grey, the same as yesterday, the same as tomorrow. The boy sits watching, shoulders slumped, the monotony pressing upon him as heavily as the hunger. Then you remember the rafters. You rise, reach up, and untee one of the bundles. Sage and thyme, dried and curled, their scent faint until your fingers crush the leaves. At once the air sharpens, bright and green, the fragrance filling your lungs. The boy's head lifts, curiosity sparking in his eyes. What is that? He whispers. Summer, you answer softly. You crumble the leaves into the bubbling pot. The effect is immediate. Steam rises rich with aroma, a fragrance far beyond what plain oats and bread could give. It drifts through the cottage, wrapping you both in invisible warmth. The boy inhales deeply, his eyes widening. It smells alive. You smile, tasting a spoonful. The broth is transformed. No longer flat, it carries layers, bitterness softened, sweetness coaxed, richness awakened. You hand the boy a bowl, and he takes it eagerly, sipping. His face lights up, surprise blooming. It tastes different, he exclaims. Yes, you replay, settling beside him. Herbs carry the memory of the garden. Even in winter, they bring back the sun. You eat together, savoring the fragrance more than the food. The steam fills the room, clinging to the beams, softening the edges of the cold. For a moment, it feels as though you are no longer trapped in January, but sitting in a green field, bees humming, thyme underfoot. Your mind drifts to the roles herbs play beyond the pot. You remember how the healer steeps, sage in boiling water to soothe the throat, thyme to ease a cough, rosemary to sharpen memory. You recall sprigs hung above doors at midsummer, believed to keep evil away. You think of priests scattering basil in holy water, blessing homes with its fragrance. Herbs are more than flavor, they are guardians, healers, silent companions through every season. The boy slurps his broth, grinning. His cheeks flush with warmth, his eyes bright. In his smile, you see the true power of herbs, not only to flavor food, but to lift spirit, to make survival feel like abundance. You place the bundle carefully back upon the shelf, vowing to use it sparingly. A pinch today, another tomorrow. Enough to stretch winter thinner, enough to keep hope alive. The fire crackles, the steam curls, the cottage breathes easier. You lean back, closing your eyes, letting the fragrance carry you. Outside, the wind gnaws at the fields, but inside, you are wrapped in summer's ghost. And so, though the meal is thin, though the pantry remains bare, the fragrance of boiling herbs has transformed the day. From dullness, delight, from survival, comfort. Evening descends quickly in January. The light fades before the boy has even finished his chores, and the air turns sharp, pressing against the shutters. Inside, the fire flickers, painting the cottage walls with gold and shadow. The day's labor has ended, but hunger still waits. You set the pot once more upon the hearth. Tonight's supper is no different from the morning, pottage thinned with water, softened bread, a pinch of herbs to bring fragrance. The boy watches you stir, his eyes heavy with fatigue. He does not complain, he has learned not to, but his silence says enough. The broth bubbles slowly, releasing its faint aroma. You ladle it into 2 wooden bowls, handing the larger to him. He takes it carefully, cupping it in both hands to warm his fingers. The firelight glints off the steam rising between you. You sit opposite him, your own bowl in your lap. For a moment, neither of you speaks. The only sounds are the crackle of firewood and the soft slurp of broth. The cottage is quiet, heavy with shadows, but not with despair. The rhythm of spoon and breath becomes a kind of music, steady and calm. The boy takes a bite of softened bread, his face relaxing. He glances up at you, and a faint smile crosses his lips. It tastes better with the herbs, he says. Nod, smiling back. Yes, they carry summer with them. You eat together slowly, savoring every mouthful. The firelight makes the broth glow richer than it is. The shadows soften the roughness of the room. Hunger is not banished, but it is calmed, quieted by the ritual of sharing. Your thoughts drift to the meaning of supper in the lives of peasants.
You remember how neighbors often gathered around one pot, how families drew close at the end of a long day, how the act of eating together bound them tighter than any chain.
Supper was never grand, never abundant, but it was always sacred. It was the moment when work ceased, when stories were told, when comfort was passed from one to another with every spoonful. The boy hums softly as he eats, a tune he has heard in church, his voice barely above a whisper. You join him quietly, your voices weaving with the crackle of the fire. For a few minutes, the cottage feels like a sanctuary, the simple act of eating transformed into prayer. When the bowls are empty, you scrape the last drops with bread, unwilling to waste even a smear. The boy licks his spoon clean, then leans back with a sigh of contentment. His face glows in the firelight, softer now, free from the shadow of hunger. You gather the bowls, set them aside, and draw your chair close to the fire. The boy curls at your feet, resting his head on your lap. You stroke his hair, feeling the warmth of his small body, the quiet rise and fall of his breath. The firelight dances across his closed eyelids, and he smiles faintly in sleep. You sit in silence, your own heart steady. The day has been long, the food meager, but the supper has done its work. It has given warmth, comfort, connection. It has turned a bare cottage into a place of peace. You glance at the shelf, the honey jar, the herb bundle, the crust of cheese wrapped in cloth. Little luxuries waiting for another day. You feel gratitude for them, but even more for this moment, for the boy asleep with a smile, for the fire burning, for the quiet supper that binds you together. Outside, the wind howls across the fields, but inside, you are safe. The fire hums, the boy breathes, the night enfolds you in calm. And so, though the meal was simple, though the cupboard is nearly bare, the quiet supper by firelight becomes a feast of its own. A feast of peace, of presence, of love strong enough to carry you through winter. The fire has burned low, the pots scrubbed clean, the bowls stacked neatly on the table. The boy sleeps soundly, curled beneath his blanket, his face softened into peace. You sit beside him, shawl wrapped around your shoulders, watching the glow of the embers fade to red. Is January still, the month of hunger, but tonight you feel a fullness deeper than food. Your eyes wander over the shelf once more. The jar of honey gleams faintly in the dim light, its golden heart waiting. The herb bundles sway gently in the draught, whispering of green fields long past. The crust of cheese rests in its cloth, sharp scent lingering in memory. These are luxuries, yes, small treasures that lift pottage into feast. Yet as you sit in the quiet, you realize the greatest luxury is not stored on the shelf. It is here, in the room itself. It is in the boy's smile when he tasted honey. It is in his laughter when the fragrance of herbs surprised him. It is in the way his eyes widened at the sharpness of cheese. It is in the sigh of contentment as he drifted into sleep after supper by firelight. These moments cannot be traded in the market, cannot be taxed by lords, cannot be stored in jars. They are the luxuries of the heart, invisible yet stronger than bread or salt. You close your eyes, letting the warmth of memory wash over you. You think of your mother, stirring her own pot of pottage years ago, tucking you into bed, whispering that tomorrow would bring enough. You think of neighbors exchanging gifts of salt and apples, weaving a net of survival. You think of feast days when a spoonful of honey or a slice of white bread made the whole village feel rich. These memories bind you to the past, as the boy binds you to the future. The world beyond the cottage may measure wealth in wheat fields and silver coins, in wheels of cheese and barrels of wine. But here, wealth is measured in something smaller, softer, the laughter of a child, the endurance of a woman, the kindness of a neighbor's hand. You whisper softly to yourself, "This is enough." The words echo in the quiet, steady and true. The embers glow, the shadows lengthen, the wind hums outside. The cottage is bare, yet rich. Hungry, yet satisfied. Poor, yet abundant in ways the manor will never know. You lean back, letting your eyes drift closed. The boy's breathing is steady. The fire hums like a lullaby. In this moment, you are at peace. Tomorrow will bring its own labor, its own hunger, its own struggle, but it will also bring honey, herbs, laughter, and love. So you sleep, wrapped not in silks but in shawl and memory, warmed not by abundance but by gratitude.
For you have discovered that the true luxuries are not of the market or the manor, but of the heart, love that endures, patience that sustains, hope that glows even in the dead of winter.